Hello and welcome to the gallery. My name is Jon and today we'll be painting our Dark Angel. Now I am not a Space Marine player. I have never played Space Marine and I am generally iffy about the idea of Space Marines. I mean, they have their place in Warhammer 40k. I mean, the game is built almost around them, but they're not my cup of tea. They are a bit shiny, comparatively, to other things in 40k. But I have to give credit where credit's due. They are the most played faction. So I had this idea to get my grips around all the Space Marine legions, that I'm going to paint a Marine from every single legion. I'm going to start with the first legion and work my way up. First, I'm going to do all the loyalists, then I will dive into the fun stuff with the heretics. Now, I might get some hate from that, but, well, so be it. I have this old metal model, Ezekiel, and, I mean, the original model is blue, but I will be painting it in the Dark Angel's green color scheme, just to have the feeling of it being the Dark Angel that I know ish. So let's just dive straight in and see where it takes us. And this is the model we'll be working on. It's Chief Librarian Ezekiel from the Dark Angels. We'll be painting him in a Dark Angels color scheme instead of the blue one that I've seen on many images, mainly because I want him green. And we're starting out from Mournfang brown base coat, and we're dry brushing a little bit of Wraithbone on top of that, just so we have some sort of ish zenithal highlighting thing going on when we start painting them with contrast paints. You could do this, of course, with an actual zenithal highlighting thing, but I felt like just using brushes this time around. So we're using Dark Angel's green for all the green bits, and especially around the pauldrons, be quite careful to put it on as smoothly as you can and then leave it to perfectly dry so you don't get that streaking effect on his pauldrons. And then we have his backpack, which is not the original one, but will make do, and his sword and hands. I keep him in these three parts mainly because these are the three parts he comes in. Now, for his tunic and his robes, and even the book and every bone bit and and the pages of his books and the purity seals, we're using skeleton bone primer, which is a nice color. I know it's a primer, but still it's a lovely color. I thinned it out a bit so it's 2-3 layers to get it looking smooth. And even though, like I said, we have these recesses and I'm painting over them now, it's still good to have them. It just gives the idea of the shadows and you see more what you're working with. After this has dried all the layers, you can see it's a lot smoother. I'm using Skeleton Horde contrast paint, and I'm mixing a little bit of contrast medium into that. It's about 50-50, so it's not too dark, but still looks damn good. And, you know, you could go into just the recesses with this, but I brushed it over everything because I knew I would be later on coming back and adding a little bit more to the highlighted areas with the base color and some highlights, so I wasn't too worried about that. The reason why I'm thinning it out is just so it isn't too dark, so it looks a little bit better on the model. If it's too dark, it looks a little bit, well, too dark. And for all the leather bits, the pouches, the waistband, the holster, everything like that, and even the big book on his side, I'm using snakebite leather because it's a good leather paint. It looks great, and especially with this dry brushy brown beige undertone that I have, it gets even more great looking. So just be careful around all of those bits so it doesn't bleed into other places, and you're pretty much good to go. Now for his bookmark and the purity seals, I'll be using a Volupus pink contrast paint and just putting a little bit on that. Be careful to shake this paint very well, and you have to put it on quite thick because it's one of those really translucent contrast paints that's not really showing too much all of the time. It's not the worst one, we have far worse ones. And now to have a little bit of red going on there, just to break up the monotony of the dark nature-like colors like the green and the brown. Let's put some Dark Angel's red on all those pipes and one of the small books, just to have some different to the monotony. And red and green and white looks very well. He's looking quite festive and Christmassy at this point, but still badass. So we're putting that over all of the hoses and everything like that, and like you see, it looks okay. I mean, the book could use a little bit more work, but hey, let's leave it at that. Now for his flesh, which we can see a little bit of, let's add some Guilliman flesh to that just to get some color going. First time around it didn't take too much, but I shook it up and added a little bit more later on. Now for his metallic pieces, I'm putting down lead belcher. And you could of course use whatever kind of silver paint you want. I like, personally I like the silver from Vallejo, but it's really shiny. This is a little bit more grimdarky color, so let's use it for this case, and it covers quite well. However, like I said, using different metallic colors is quite necessary more often than not, especially if you have a lot of metal like I have on my knights. I like to mix it up and add a few different metallic colors to it, just so it looks a little bit more real. If you only have the one, it looks flat, even though it has a lot of things going for it. So retributed armor for all the gold bits. You could mix this up and put a little bit of warp block bronze, a little bit of more shiny gold, a little bit of darker gold, a little bit of darker silver. Just add different metallic colors, because they tend to, even though they are shiny and striking, they tend to look a little bit flat more often than not. For the silver bits, I'm adding null. I'm not using my regular method of basilican gray mixed with contrast medium. I want this a little bit darker. I want some more definition for it, because it's such shiny, it's such small amounts. It's just chains and a little bit on the sword and stuff like that. And for the gold bits, I'm using Reichland Flesh Shade, so we get a warmer gold color to it. It enriches it a little bit and makes it a little bit more grand. If I would use my regular method, it would look a little bit darker and a little bit more worn, which is perfectly fine for your regular Marines, and not to mention if you're doing something a little bit more evil, then I would definitely use that instead. But in this case, like I said, Reichland Flesh Shade for all the gold bits. Okay, so we got a tabletop level-ish model, but since I'm only painting the one guy and he is an HQ unit, I think, let's work on him a little bit more to give him a little bit of extra look to him. The stuff I just did, you could paint on a unit of these guys fairly quickly and get them ready for the tabletop, but I want him a little bit extra, a little bit more, because like I said, he's an HQ unit and therefore he needs a little bit of extra tender loving care. So let's continue on and work a little bit more on the highlights, a little bit more on the shadows, a little bit more on the stuff and the thing and the stuff in the place. Now that everything has dried, let's start bringing out some highlights to this model. He looks good, but he's a little bit flat, especially for an HQ unit. So we'll start by taking a little bit of green, and we're starting to edge highlight the armor panels. And mostly I will be edge highlighting it just on the top, because I'm not going for a full heavy metal edge highlight. I'm not insane like some people are. I'm just going for the top bits and the edges, so we'll get the edge highlight going. And we will add a little bit of lighter green afterwards, just to pop it up a little bit more. Now for his actual pauldron that has just a big flat area, I'm thinning out the green quite a lot and just dragging it to the top, so we will get a somewhat smooth highlight there. I could have spent hours doing this, but I just did it in a hurry, just to get some highlight going, and I'm not too happy about it, but I'm gonna make do. Next we're getting a lighter color, and it's a quite lighter color. It's the auric flesh. It's almost a beigey green color, and we're just going over the absolute edges, and mainly the absolute edges that are facing the top, just to get some extra look to him. He's turning maybe a little bit too green. He's almost turning salamandery green, but when we get to that legion, we'll do something a little bit different, so it will be some difference between the two. And yes, just on the top, and that's about it. The armor panels are done. Now for his robes, like I said, I put a lot of contrast paint on them, so they are quite darkened down. So I'm taking my base color again, a little bit thinner this time, and I'm just putting it on the top, so we keep the shadow in the recesses, but we're still getting that beige, lovely, interesting color to the robe. And it works pretty damn good. I mean, the recesses are still a little bit on the darker side, a little bit darker than I would have liked, but we'll work on that a little bit later on, just to mix it a little bit better together. And don't forget all the folds that are in between here and there. They are quite necessary. Then we're getting a birch color from Scale 75. This is one color that I got not too long ago, and I really like it. It's a little bit lighter than the bone color, so we're thinning that down and just putting it on the uppermost recesses where the light will most hit it, like on his thigh and on the top of his folds. We're not putting it over everything, just to get a little bit of extra highlight going here and there. And then for the shadows, because I felt they were a little bit too dark, I take the original color I used, and it's really, really thinned down this time around. And we're just glazing it into the recesses. It looks a little bit like it's pooling in there, but once it dries, it'll dry just a little bit of tint to the color. Now for his sword, it has this emblem on it, and we're going to continue on with the red theme that we had going. So we're starting out with a little bit of red and just being careful just to hit this. It's quite easy because it's emblazed upon it. So it's quite easy to paint it on top. And afterwards we're going in with a little bit of orange on top of that just to give it a little bit of a fire effect going. And I liked it. It's simple and it's easy and it looks quite okay. We're not, like I said, we're not going for competition here, but we're going for a fairly well painted model, so don't have to lose any mind about that. And then with the orange, we're also highlighting the book, and we're going to drag it along all the cables and stuff like that just to get a small highlight going there. Try to keep it not too much on the brush. We're almost dry brushing on top of it just to get something on the top so it's a little bit more 3D. Now for the purity seals, I'm using Emperor's Children, and we're just grazing it a little bit here and there so it looks like the wax has been pushed in and still has shadows. We're not going into the seals, just a little bit on top of them. And the same thing for the bookmark, and we're just dragging it here and there so it looks a little bit worn. For all the leather bits, it's similar like we did with the bookmark. We're taking Baneblade Brown, which is a quite lighter color in this case, and we're edge highlighting the cases, and then we're dragging it atop to look like the leather has been worn quite a bit. Started out with not too much on the brush just to get a hint of it, and then I had a little bit more on the brush and got the bigger scratches going. And I think that looks okay. Remember, when you're putting it down, it looks quite striking, but since it is a little bit mixed with water, it will dry a little bit lighter. For his face, we're going to highlight it with Palettes Witchface. He's pale. I don't know, because of some reason he's pale, and we're putting it on his eyebrow, his cheekbone, and also a little bit on his eye. I know it might be easier just to put white there, and I have the paint out in such a little spot that I decided to use it. And he's getting a blue eye, because why not? Could have done whatever eye color. I wanted blue for this case, and I hate painting eyes, so I have to find something to make it more worth my while. For the gold, we're using Auric Armor Gold, which is a little bit lighter color than what we started out with, and we're just getting a little bit on the top, a little bit here and there, just to give it some highlights. We're not going over everything, just some tiny highlights here and there. Also, I don't use gloss shades, so it dulled down a little bit, but this will give it some shine back to it. For the sword, we're not doing anything fancy. I'm almost wholly painting one side of the sword and then just edge highlighting the other blade of the sword, the other edge of the sword. So it gets this shadow lightness value going, but in a quite simple way. I mean, you could do whatever you want, really. You could shade it more and do more to it. I have this old glaze bloodletter, so I decided to put that around the emblem, so it gives off like it's almost an arcane techno-babble thing going there. So it's a little bit seeping into the blade, the red color of the emblem, like it's giving off heat or something like that. And it went a little bit haywire, so I brushed it with my finger, and that's fine. For the face, it went a little bit weird with all that, so Raglan flesh shade on top of it just to get some better skin tone going. And the face is pretty much done after that. We're not doing anything more to it, really. And I also put a little bit of the orange color in the eyelens, as you can see. Now, next, after all the gold bits and everything, I felt we needed a little bit more shadow here and there. So I got some Nuln Oil, and I just brushed that into the places where I felt more shadow was needed, around here and there. It's not everywhere, it's just, like I said, here and there, getting some extra look, a little bit more definition. I often do this with models. I get either Nuln Oil or some black ink or something like that, and just run it into recesses, and where I feel like It's missing the shadow. It's missing some sort of natural outline. And of course, for the letters of whatever they're called on the purity seals, just a dark grey paint and a thin brush, and drag it along with dashes and whatever you feel like, so it looks like something really profound and interesting is written on there. The base, we're not going to spend too much time on. It's just aggro stone over the base coat that's already there, and we're just going to leave it at that. I mean, the base is not the main thing for this model. If I was doing something grand and heroic, but this is an old model on a small base, and it's got a little bit of crud on it. Therefore, just leave it as is. Just give it a little bit of definition so it looks more natural. And here we have it, the first of the many legions I will be painting over the next months, maybe years. It's Chief Librarian, Ezekiel of the Dark Angels. And I mean, it looks okay. It's an old model, and I think I did it somewhat of a justice. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me here today. There are links in the description for all kinds of stuff, social media and various tidbits. You do with it what you will. Like, share and subscribe, and hit that little bell thing at the bottom, and let the colors flow. But until next time, farewell.